Arabic by James Joyce. James Augustine Aloysius Joyce, born on February 2nd, 1882 in Dublin, Ireland. He was known for his innovation and highly influenced Irish writer of the 20th century. However, he sometimes rejected his homeland. He was the author of novels, short stories, and poetries. He was noted for his experimental use of language and exploration of new literary method in such large work of fiction as Ulysses in 1922, which was banned in many locations. He died on January 13, 1941, Zurich, Switzerland, when he was less than a month short of his 59th birthday. His childhood. James Joy was born on February 2nd, 1882, in Rutger, Dublin suburb. He was from a middle-class family, and he was baptized according to the rites of the Catholic Church in 3 days after he was born. Around his childhood, Joy was attacked by a dog, and that led him to his lifelong scyphobia. He also suffered from astrophobia, according to his superstitious aunt that she had described thunderstorm as a sign of God's wrath. His family. For his family background, we'll discuss in two sections. One is his parents. Joy's paternal grandfather, he in this picture has black coat, James Augustine, who married Ellen O'Connell. His parents, John and Mary Jane Murray Joy, were both musically talented, a trait which was passed along to their son. His family was large, 6 sisters and 3 brothers. James was the oldest of 10 children who survived childhood. On early 1890s, his father lost his job, and because it is probably of his drinking problem, the family began to have some financial problem and subsequently moved to the modern small town called Bray, very near to Dublin. In 1903, his mother was deathly ill, and she was diagnosed by cancer. He returned to Dublin in time for her death. After his mother's death, Joyce remained in Dublin, and that year he met Nora Bransell, a young woman with reddish-brown hair, native of Galway in the west of Ireland, who was working in a hotel as a maid. Joy asked for her for their first date on 16th of June 1904, and 1 decade later he wrote all the specific details of that day on his novel Ulysses. They fell in love, they married, and they lived in Trieste, Paris, and Zurich, and in Switzerland. In 1906 they had their first child, George, and 1 year later they had their daughter, Louise. As education, he was a brilliant student. At the age of 6 and a half, he was enrolled at Clongowes Wood College, a Jewish school for boys in Ireland. But his family withdrew him due to lack of tuition. Then he studied at home. After a while, he could study again, but this time at Christian Brothers O'Connell School on North Richmond Street. This is exactly a school which the story of Harry happened. From 1893 to 1898 he studied at Belvedere College, another private school, but this time his father met a priest who knew the family, and Joyce was given a reduction in fee to attend. In 1898 he enrolled at the University College Dublin. He graduated in 1902 with a degree in modern language. He was focusing on philosophy and language study in English, French, and Italian. He also became active in theatrical and literary cycles in city. During 1903 he studied medicine in Paris, but he could not afford the fee for the schooling. So he stayed in Paris and tried to earning money, but soon he abandoned his medical studies. Joyce's biographer, Richard Ellman, suggested that this may have been happened because he found the technical lecture in France too hard. Later, he also learned basic Norwegian. For his worldview, although most of his adult life was spent abroad, Joyce's fictional universe centers was Dublin City and is populated largely by a character who closely resembled family member, his enemies and friends from his time there. Joy's religious beliefs came different through the time. When her mother got sick, he came back to Dublin, his mother fearing for his son's empty, and while she died, James refused to kneel with other members of the family, praying to her. Although the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas had a young influence on him for most of his life, his movement was modernism. In 1915, his student went to the Great War, but Joyce didn't, and he moved to Zurich. During this period, Joyce took an active interest in socialism. He had attended meetings when he was still in Dublin. Although his practical engagement decreased after 1907, he observed in socialist organization. In 1918, he declared himself against every state and found much in the individual philosophies. Joyce set himself to finish Ulysses in Paris, delighted to find that he was gradually gaining fame as an avant-garde writer. The Arabi by James Joyce. Example of author's worldview in the story. From the first line, the beginning of the story, we can see the author says, North Richmond story. We can North Richmond Street, being blind, was a quiet street except at the hour when Christian's brother school set the boys free. He is mentioning about Dublin, which is exactly the same of his school street that he had gone. We already know that the author had a modern view, and Arabi, both the Gare and Arabi Market were the symbol of modernism, and led the boy to run away from his soulless and dark life that he faced with Dublin, and he narrated it by the brown picture of the house and mentioned the other house of the street. Conscious of decent life within, gazed at one another with brown, imperturbable faces. Comparison by it would be a splendid bazaar. They are completely in front of each other. James did not believe in Catholic, and his religious belief changed through the time. I think while he said the former tenant of our house, the priest, had died in the back drawing room. By the dead priest, you want to emphasize on the priest absent or useless, or on the another part of Arabic. The narrator said, one evening I went into the back drawing room in which the priest had died. I think once again you want to emphasize on his beliefs about not needing a priest. The personality of the main character, I think, is dynamic, because upon the dynamic explanation, these character types change from the beginning to the end of the story. They usually their changes inner changes. In the Arabic story, while he speaks to Gere, he was completely emotional and full of stress and wanted to pass these days very fast, and he explained as what innumerable foolish late waste my waking and sleeping through after that evening. I wish to annihilate the tedious intervening days. I chafed against the work of school, but while he could not buy anything, he described the situation as then I turned away slowly and walked down the middle of bazaar. His personality is immature, shy, and inexperienced, because while she speak with him, he was that much confused, which he did not know even he answered her or not, or even what should he has to say. And he explained as, when she addressed the first word to me, I was so confused that I did not know what to answer. She asked me, was I going to Araby? I forgot whether I answered yes or no. And based on these explanations and examples, he also is immature because he cannot control his feeling the following days. The purpose of the story, we want to say that sometimes how much you try and you effort on something, you may not become succeed. And also there is much difference between illusion and reality. Here, he tried to reach the Arabi bazaar to buy something for the girl that he liked, but he could not buy anything. And the examples and the quotation and the story say, gazing up into the darkness, I saw myself as a creature driven and dried by vanity, and my eyes burned with anguish and anger. Also, in one part of the story, the author said that he is on the top of the house and looking from the window to her house, but cannot see her, although he imagining her and he has some illusion about her. About the literary, we have several literary devices here in the story. I wrote some of them. I hope they are enough. For simile, for example, he said, her dress swung as she moved her body. Or on the another one, he said, her name was like a summons to all my foolish blood. Or we have a metaphor here, the wild garden behind the house, that we know that the garden will not be wild. Or the last one, all work and no play make Jack a dull boy, which is his uncle stated. Or, for example, for foreshadowing, we had several foreshadowing. Said, I didn't know whether I would ever speak to her or not, or if I spoke to her, how could I tell her of my confused adoration? Or, if I go, I said, I will bring you something. These are some foreshadowing in the story. We have personification. There's North Richmond Street being blind. We know that the street will not be blind. Or the other one, a few straggling bushes. We know that bushes will not straggle. I think I found one colloquialism. I hope it's be right. The nasal chanting of a street singer who sang a come all you about O Don Was Rosa. And I also find one repetition. I press the palms of my hands together until they tremble, murmuring, oh love, many times. The other one is symbol. Actually, the whole story is the whole story was a symbol, but I also found some. For example, a flood from my heart seemed to pour itself out into my bosom, or I chafed against the work of school, or I could not call my wandering thoughts together, which want to say that I could not concentrate my mind. For the next one, the irony. For knowing the irony of the story, first we have to realize the meaning of Arabi. Arabi here is a symbol of beauty, mystery, and romance. For himself. But what did he get at the end of the story? Nothing actually. Vanity. And he couldn't find or buy anything. Even he even couldn't reach to Arabi Bazaar at the adequate time. The irony is vanity. In the state of beauty and mystery of Arabic, he had nothing. The next part is the climax. The climax of the story is when he is realizing the situation, that he came late and almost all the stalls were closed, and he even didn't have enough money. And the climax is where they said, nearly all the stalls were closed and the gathered part of the hall was in darkness. For the last part, the text of the intent message of the story, he loved to talk to her, but while he started talking to her, he did not even remember whether he answered or not, or the time which he did all his effort to be on time to bazaar to buy a present for her, he couldn't. He didn't even have enough money to buy a present. So sometimes how much we try, we may not succeed, and not everything is related to us.